Real life.
Superpowers.
You got to grow a serious stomach. I mean, we almost shut the company, 2 or 3 times. We got to a point in which we were a month and a half from no money. Domain expert who decided to leave. Investor that were like, well, we're not going to inject more. Good luck. And a few other bad news in 1 week. We had some serious crises. And I think, again, as I said, resilience, consistency, and some discipline. But you got to have the stomach. And then, by the way, it's the one minus that. So you're going to have some really great months and weeks. You cannot get into euphoria and celebrate it too much. Celebrate a little bit. But know that that's probably going to pass as well. You're going to have some hard time. And you cannot mourn and agonize too much when it's a downturn.
Hey all, today we speak with Oded Barak. Having identified a need in the insurance landscape, he left a promising career as an executive in leading global corporations to co-found his startup, 5 Sigma. To date, they've raised $26 million and dozens of insurance carriers and Insurtechs use their solution. Here's his story.
Real life.
Superpowers.
Up in the sky, it's a bird. It's a plane.
Gentlemen, we can rebuild him. We have the technology.
It's alive!
Real life.
Superpowers.
Oded, welcome to Real Life Superpowers.
Thank you, guys. Thank you for having me.
What are you up to these days?
Summertime. So I'm actually in transition, moved from one of the worst thing ever, by the way, moving houses. First time I do it with no second half to help me. So with 3 kids and a dog, it's a heck of a process in the transition in the company, moving on and pushing forward and growing. So
I also had to move recently, and it's so difficult and the type of thing that you need a while to recover from and to forget just how challenging it is.
And I can tell you the following. I knew I had to move on the 1st of June. And then at some point I was so busy at work and I said to myself, yeah, it's a long time from now, right? And then it's the 27th of May and I woke up and I'm like, holy shit, I got to move in 3 days. So.
How did you choose where to move to?
Where to move? Sometimes the house finds you. Like in many cases, in other places in life, I actually looked for a place for about 6 months, and I just didn't find it. Eventually, while vacationing in Hydra with my kids, a friend called me for something else, an artist, and then she actually complained that she needs to leave her place, and she's looking for someone to take it over. And I'm looking for a place for 6 months now, and so here you go. But it's mainly I moved out of the city with a hectic lifestyle. I know I need to change some energy, and I find myself now in a green reserve, beautiful place on a cliff, very close to the beach, which I got to say, especially as our hectic, crazy, daily routine, this is a peace of mind which came from God.
As an entrepreneur, are you scared of going to have that peace of mind being on a cliff? Everybody has to be where everything's happening. It's like a
yes, you're gonna have to jump over the cliffs in some days. No, I gotta say it's actually all about balance, and I think even again, just think about my journey up to today and being so total in everything I did. This actually, perfect setup in the way that you can never really kind of cut off your thoughts and your brainstorming internally. You always look for the blind spot. There's never peace of mind. So when you find that, 5 a.m. to 6 a.m. when you enter the water and you look up and you just breathe for a second, that's exactly what I needed.
But isn't it a give up to not to meet people? As an entrepreneur, you're always pushing to meet people and go and meetings and whatever. And then you're that's the scary part. I'm not saying it's not right. I understand it.
No, first of all, I'm still half an hour from Tel Aviv. It's not like I moved, to a very far away place. And second, today connectivity, there's absolutely not. It's a non-issue.
And 5 Sigma, is that the first time that you're doing your own thing, right?
Yeah. My background, I actually grew up in more kind of a typical corporate America, basically, workplace. And after 8 years into service, another 5 years working for the government, I decided to grow up and do something. And, after my MBA in the States, ended up being a banker at Goldman, did the hardcore, investment banking. Then moved back to Tel Aviv and headed Corp Dev M&A for a small company here called Amdocs. Again, a corporate position at a team in the US and Israel. Then I was a CFO in London for an energy company. So actually plugged myself out of tech, either strategic finance, but always around tech. And then I did something which is much more kind of a CapEx heavy type of work. We had ports and trains and the real logistical part of a commodity energy business. That's the first time I actually got really exposed to the world of insurance, by the way. As a CFO, I was actually overseeing that portion of the company and the pathology is associated with that. And at one point I decided that it's, I got to start doing something for myself. So.
What do you mean by doing something for yourself?
Building, your own kind of baby, being responsible for your own faith in a way that you build your home. And, from a culture perspective, from the vision, from the people you work with.
But then, I could also argue that when you set off to do something like that, you're walking away from something very stable. And that, in a sense, is taking a huge risk with respect to your life.
100%. The trade-off is clear. You out for a journey, which the level of uncertainty is the, holy grail. Versus pretty predictable work. You know what you're doing. Project may be changing, but you know exactly what you're doing in your role. As an entrepreneur, you do many things in a chaotic environment, and it's and as we all know, the risk profile and the level of success, the ratio is extremely small. So you take your fate in your own hand in a way, but it's definitely, I would call it a pretty penalizing path. Very gratifying on one side, on one hand, but it's a roller coaster. And if you're up for, ups and downs, that's the path you should take. If not, stay away and keep on corporate life.
Were you aware that's what you're entering?
Yes, 100%, absolutely. And I bought some as head of Corp Dev M&A. I bought some companies that used to be startups, and I saw it, when I was a banker in the tech side. But it's like everything else in life. The difference between I'd call it the experiential knowledge, right, and the cognitive one is quite vast. And so experiencing it is I would say nothing really prepares you for that.
I think that's fascinating because you sort of had a close look inside, and despite not being able to fully experience it because it's not your experience, you were able to sort of understand that this is not going to be easy. And you were working at a stable and challenging and interesting position, I think probably positions like across your journey. And I'm wondering, did you feel like you couldn't really fulfill yourself without doing your own thing? Like, what, can you explain that?
What were you missing?
That's a true psychological deep dive. What drives us in life to choose different paths, especially the ones that are far from being your comfort zone. So that requires a whole different probably set that I need probably to explore with my, in my sessions. But I do believe that there's always something that you feel is, the difference between something that is given to you versus something you really create. And I think that and again, it's not as if, you become a banker, it's something that is given to you as a gift, right? You earn your way to get there. And a lot of hard work, more than brain, by the way. But at the end of the day, it's still kind of a position that it's pretty, I would say, cushy lifestyle in a way. It's given to you, then you kind of call it the going to the 1 to 2 to 3, call it vertically versus horizontally versus the 0 to 1 element, right? The creating thing and going, call it you hunt your own food. I need to bring it home. And I think it tapped to a much deeper inner self, for lack of better terms. And maybe it's something I was missing, but and that's something, I was inner call to do so and explore. But I think as well, I always thought that, we all know Milton Friedman, be shareholder value. You want to be the shareholder. So I think there's an element for that from a financial standpoint, and maybe that's part of the people rationalizing the path. But I thought, at least if I'm going to fail, let's fail in something I really kind of want to build and do versus, keep on doing the more of the same.
So it was actually, you were looking for like happiness, not pleasure, meaning the element of like a surprise in holding your destiny and see if be on the other side of the chain. And, is it like a bucket list thing, or is it more like I had this amazing idea and I want to challenge it, or look at these idiots, I could have done it better, or I learned so much and I want to, do it myself?
First of all, I think it's a very interesting way to put it. And you said various things in one sentence. I think, first of all, I think it's the salt and pepper hat that, by the way, it was salt and pepper 5 years ago. Now it's actually completely white, but time flies. I think it's, in a way, I'm humble enough to say it's not like you're never going to hear me say something that some of my colleagues and peers would say, those idiots. No.
They're obviously not idiots because they're just successful. But when I say that, even my entrepreneur life, when you say, I need a nemesis, right?
I get it. I think it's more of the former of what you said. I think, first of all, I'm even if I'm looking at what we do today, I would categorize it more of an enabling versus the disruptor versus enabler. I think we're more on the enabler side. I think we take and leverage upon what people did in our industry and just take it to a completely different level. And then transform it. But it's not like, wow, we are, who invented the wheel in a way. But for me, it wasn't really, I got something completely different in life and I'm going to do it better than anybody else. And I have this amazing idea. I went on a journey to search where we can find, let's categorize it as supply-demand gap, right? An increasing one that we can actually bring some deep capabilities to close that gap and answer market need. But we went through, I would say, about 8 months of a process to actually think about what's the path we want to take.
Who is we?
Two of my co-founders, Dror, Solomon, and Michael and Misha Korchili, which are amazing techies, brilliant individuals.
Were they also corporate before?
No, they actually came out of the Prime Minister's office tech units for about 10 years. They've been there, as research and developers, and then team leaders, and to some serious national security awards and all that kind of buzzwords. But beyond that, just absolutely amazing individuals on a personality level. And we knew that bring that combination of brain and I would say some experience, and we can actually create something really, really meaningful together.
So how did you even gang up together, for lack of a better phrase?
It's a small market. People know each other. I used to work in the Prime Minister's office. They used to be in the tech side. We have common friends. When I came back from actually London, someone who knew both of us kind of thought, you guys should team up, think about some stuff, and maybe good things are going to come out of it.
Wow, that is so interesting, because it's not like you had this idea and you figured out, okay, who am I going to do this with? And my passion is towards that mission. It was truly a calling of, I have to do something of my own. I know I have this skill set and I feel ready. And now I have to find the right partners and to find the right thing.
It's so true. It's exactly the process we went through, which is somewhat different than others, right? And then the path just to explore and decide what we want to do was quite, I would say, 8 months until we landed. And then you're going to go through ping pong of what exactly you want to do. But and as you can imagine, always a journey. But yeah, we were like, we want to do something together. We want to build something on our own. Let's find that thing.
Okay. Explain, elaborate, please.
So, it's exactly a process we went through. We were actually sitting in Misha's living room for month on month and strategizing and analyzing, looking market, wanted to look for a big problem, wanted to look for a problem that, at the core of it stands, or the bridge between the need and the supply demand will be data and tech, something that touches everyone, consumer-wise, right? And that not everybody already went to do. Like you say, cyber in Israel, everybody went to do cyber. The next thing will be maybe healthcare. And by the way, we thought about healthcare. We thought about maybe on the consumer side. Took us a while to land into the insurance market and understand, by the way, within that sandbox, because you say Insurtech, right? Market is a big thing. But, most companies went initially to the distribution side, right? The Hippos of the world and the Next and the Lemonades of the world to actually provide a different experience as an insurer. We actually went to the place everybody shied away from because it's the core, it's hard, very complex, which is claims management. But it took us a while to actually land on that. And even then, what exactly is the path within it that we want to provide? What is the tool? Is that a point solution? Is it an end-to-end solution?
How do you manage such ideation sessions? Because I think many people listening have that passion, but they don't know the what. And I think a lot of people do try to attempt such ideation sessions in order to find it, but sort of after a while ditch it because it just becomes overwhelming and there's no real rules of thumb here. And it seems like maybe you've tapped into it doesn't seem coincidental here. It seems like maybe you've tapped into some sort of structure that could maybe help others also identify a need and then identify a right market and sort of figure out how they can find that thing.
Hands down, the most complex stage of it all. The most frustrating side, because you can imagine every time you kind of decide to open a door, what you find at the end of the door is a corridor with 10 other doors. And that never ends.
Yeah.
And that process can actually lead to a serious frustration and a very long, and it's true, that many people can give up. At some point, you need to make a decision. And I think, the hardest thing, by the way, and I think as an entrepreneur, one of the biggest things you learn, you cannot get to a PhD level of certainty before you take an act, because then you're always going to be too late, or you're never going to actually act. And so you got to get yourself, what are the key questions you need to answer to get you to the next phase. And even if you don't have 100% of the answers, 80%, 70% will make it, and you'll live with the risk. But eventually you got to move forward. And we actually stepped on something and we decided to go one path. And then we discovered as we start kind of working towards that, and I'll explain in a second exactly, that's actually not going to be the right path. And we moved to another one, and then we discovered that that's not actually going to be the right one, still within claims management, right? Once we made that decision from overall market problem, again, as I call it, the supply demand side. So for example, we thought of actually going and creating a point solution within what the quarterback of the claims journey is a function called adjuster. The person or the entity, whether it's a human or not, that manage the entire process from start to end. Then we discovered that the point solution is just not going to cut it because there's so many other deficiencies that even if you solve that one small piece, it's just not going to work, and what is that piece? And eventually we decided to go on a wide scale. And with that, actually, we're going to be a service provider, and we're actually going to handle claims ourselves as an outsourcing entity, but we're going to do it in a very smart platform. And then we discovered that people actually minimizing the usage of that entities and want to own the experience of the consumer, but they really like that product, the prototype, and so on. So things one led to the other to actually bring us to come with an end-to-end solution, a very data-driven one, which makes the entire story very, very different, experience very different, and the value proposition very different. But I'm jumping here, and so, but it was a very, very tough process, to land there.
But how do you narrow it down in the first place, the claims? I'm trying to think, was there some sort of unfair advantage that helped you and you thought, okay, we could, through these through the combination of our skills and our knowledge, that's where we make most sense? What did you cling on to?
So I think when we kind of set up to say, well, remember that data and tech should be the core of our ability to actually move the needle. Because first of all, my tech guys are one of those super sharp guys, both academically and their experience of the usage of data and technology, both in their academic certification and awards, as well as their real life experience of what they did. I can actually look at large systems. I came from companies that build and develop core systems to some giants, and understanding how to maneuver right within this corporate world to actually enter those players. Because there's some kind of a kamikaze mindset when you're going to go to a very risk averse market with a core system that basically handles 70% of the capital payout and call it a front end when it comes to their customers, right? That's when you submit a claim. That's when you need them the most, right? And you think they're going to actually give you the light of the, the day to actually manage this in a startup platform. You got to be, it's in between kind of a dreamer, delusional, some would say, but you got to actually have a very thick stomach and have the faith and the confidence you're actually going to manage to do so, because you know how to work with those type of players. And so the combination of the team and what I thought I'd bring to the table is that ability to penetrate this very large market, and a well-needed one that didn't change for many, many years. And as I said, when we thought about the insurance as a whole, we saw many companies going and providing this new experience of distribution platform, but nobody touched that portion of actually the consumer experience when they submit a claim. And so it took us a while, but we said this is something which we believe is large enough, is painful enough, and has a real place for innovation.
So like that's a real added value. Like people don't understand how hard that is. The sales cycle to B2B, if I'm hearing correctly, you said like I was introduced in the energy company that you worked for in the insurance idea, and you're pivoting. So it's like the journey of pivoting the product. There's like a few types of startup. I call one hardware, which is like, making a product. There's what's called a hyper startup, which, connects and optimizes whatever. And then there's like the B2B heavy sales cycle. Now, people don't understand that startups, there could be amazing ideas, and there are, and just they don't know the politics. They don't know how to get in the culture. To implement something inside a big company is near to hard as you have to be some type of Tom Cruise to know how to implement it and also make them worth the while, because, Coca-Cola, there's no owner. It's a corporate. So what do you have to say to anybody that goes to give a SaaS for a B2B and implements? Because honestly, there's also a culture variable here. How do you give that to your tech people to get in?
So let's break it into pieces. The first thing that you said, I think is 100% right. It's not enough that you have a very strong platform or any solution, especially in such a risk-averse market with people kind of afraid of change, right? And we're going to talk about what actually created that change in this industry in a second. What's the compelling event here? But I think it's the fact that even if you have a really slick platform that shows many, many different great stuff that they're looking for, you got to inspire confidence that you can actually deliver. Imagine it's an industry that implementation of a core system will take people, just the implementation will take between a year to 2 years and even more, with tens of hundreds of millions of dollars implemented. So, okay, now you come and you tell me that you can do it as a cloud native, a SaaS company, you can do it in a matter of months or weeks. First of all, let me doubt it. Second, what's the quality of what I'm getting, right? So your ability to, and especially when you're a startup, you're going to be here next year. So there's multiple challenges that you need to overcome to score and to be able to land your first customers. And that's why, by the way, that goes to the go-to-market strategy. How do you actually build your way into the market, right? It's not, I'm going to come with a great product, I'm going to sell it to the 20, 30, $40 billion carriers, insured carriers. That's not going to happen. And so the way to build it, and that's what we did, it was really kind of look at the ones that are willing to take the risk.
How'd you identify them?
Yeah, so how to identify? So the industry is actually very structured, but what you call tier 1 to tier 5. And then there's the wave of new Insurtech companies that looking for SaaS solution like themselves. By the way, part of the hurdle that you have in this industry that about 5 years ago, 6 years ago, you would ask companies to say, I'm never going to go to the cloud. You still were in that mindset, right? that means actually you're getting in the right timing, right? Because they're going to move to the cloud. Everybody eventually moves to the cloud. Some giants will maybe stay there for a few more years, but eventually it's going to happen. So look for those who actually made a transition and looking for a few things. One, I was looking for short sales cycle, time to KPI, because I want to demonstrate that my system, the platform actually can work not only in laboratory environment, but in real life and can create value, right? And then you can start building your way upwards towards the bigger ones. You're starting to get those KPIs, you start to get the attention of the industry, then you can start up to the big guys. But if you think you're going to actually come day one to a $5 or even a $1 billion company, right? And they call it tier 3, and you're going to sell them an end-to-end core system, it's just not going to happen. Yeah. And by the way, they're going to suck the entire energy of your company. You're not going to be able to demonstrate repetitivity, right, of the model. And so we look for those Insurtech companies, and there's a bunch, and some small tier 5 companies, local carriers, and basically, manage our way through, got a few customers. It took us a while, then COVID hits. And then everybody was like, wait a second. And we got stuck with 2 customers. We were about, by the way, in some call it miracle. I think it was just a hard work and a lot of relationship work. We landed against the biggest guy in the industry. We landed an RFP, which we were the finalist against the biggest companies, vendors in the market, the subsidiary of AIG. We won that, and that for itself would be the singular moment that changes the company. What happened then in the first quarter of AIG, they lost 93% profitability, and they decided to write off $250 million of that company that chose us. So we won the battle, we lost the war, and then we were supposed to finalize a financing round, and we basically were the term sheet was pulled back because we still only 2 customers, and then took us about a year plus to actually move from 2 customers to about 13 customers without actually even seeing the customers because of COVID, no flight. And then we knew something clicked. And now we actually at that point of moving up the stack in terms of smaller companies to now bigger companies and larger ACV and so on and so forth. But that's a journey that takes time, with about 4.5 years to actually, a lot of resilience, a lot of, I would say, discipline and consistency to actually be able to work through. So it's a combination of, as I said, the understand how your go-to-market strategy is and being able to demonstrate based on that your capability to deliver.
We're excited to be collaborating with the Israeli website CTech, owned by Kalkalist, Israel's leading business newspaper. CTech is the gateway of the Israeli high-tech to the tech world and vice versa. If you're not already a regular reader, we strongly recommend that you check out kalkalistech.com, CALCALISTECH.com, to stay up to date on all high-impact stories from the Israeli tech scene.
For me, there's emotion of traction, right? So when you have 2 clients and then you find the automation of it, like getting it through online, and you're getting feedback. Like on the internet, if you don't get feedback, that's the only really bad thing, close it. If you get bad feedback, that's fine. If you get great feedback, because it means they're part of the solution and you see that feedback. So in that sense, you said you're onto something, even if you have 2 clients, as long as they're not throwing you off the shelf. And by the way, the sales cycle for competition should be as hard as yours. So you're inside already, it'll be hard for the competition to kick you out, okay? The thing is, I'm really intrigued, and that for me is the pivot moment. It's always like the foot in the door, okay? So I'm talking about like that 1 or 2 client. You're identifying the clients, right? But you're sending out pitches and say, it's not right for me yet. Or they say, okay, add this feature and this feature. And usually startups go and add features, go crazy and whatever. Like, how was the first or second one? Because that's like the real, if you have that, in my opinion, that's the moment where if that didn't happen, there's a lot of outer variables.
And as people are different, you would assume, by the way, and this is the interesting thing, that you believe you got a common problem across the industry. By the way, deficiencies, both, doesn't matter if it's in Timbuktu, New York, London, or Tel Aviv. Adjusters and claims organizations are capped by their own tools that they use. They cannot actually perform to what they need to perform. And that's just across, by the way. And you think there's a commonality, basically, then everybody wants exactly the same thing. And then you discover the reality is very, very different, right? And a SaaS company, by the way, you want to provide a product, and then this is that's the product. Now, if you want to configure it and so on, you're welcome. But it took us a while to get there, to understand that, right? And again, by the way, to educate the market what a SaaS is, right, versus what's the on-prem that they used to. And you're not a service company, you're actually a tech product company. So there was a journey there. But I think, for me, that moment that feedback that we got was when Chief Claims Officer, who is the buyer of the system, right? The users are the adjusters.
Is this the first time? Okay.
No, it was, I think it was on the third one, or in one of those pitches that we got, and we got somebody look at the demo, and he says, it was she, and she goes, you actually have some things in your system that I wouldn't even imagine that I need, that changes, my ability to manage the team better, or have a much better visibility, or you brought in some capabilities that I wouldn't even think about. And by the way, I think part of what we did very early on, from the product design and so on, is to bring into the company folks with 30 years of claims management experience. So talking about this humility, I would say that you think technology going to solve it all. No, you need, call it the combination of the domain expertise coupled with the deep tech capabilities, understanding and expertise to actually create this symbiotic solution, right? And so when a manager saw the solution, and adjuster, the user saw they said, wow, this is like moving from a core phone to a smartphone, so to speak. There's an adoption phase and so on, but this completely changed the way we actually manage claims. And by the way, in a way you can think about most, I would just a little bit of a context. Most claims management systems to date were designed not with the consumer in mind or effectiveness in mind. It was designed with the compliance in mind, which really explains why loss adjusting expense, which is the measurement of how much the expense to just settle claims, just the process, didn't change for more than a decade. Doesn't matter what systems you use. And you ask yourself, how come? You move to digitization, And so you see that now they add more and more administrative drag or tasks for adjusters to do what they need to do to compliance. And it happens that adjuster work for the system versus system working for them, and taking for them, offloading a lot of stuff that they need to do and do it for them in the background. And so create many things for them, but and for management. But I think that was a moment when we said we got something really special here. The second piece was that we managed to get customers up and running within 8 weeks. So something that took folks, but by the way, now we have customers that actually went live in 2 weeks. But eventually when somebody takes a heavy system, it will take a few months, right? You can take a quarter or so. But this is not in the magnitude of a year or more to actually go live. So those two different things, feature, workflow capabilities, smarts on one hand, and the ability to do it, implement it really quickly with a very low risk. Of that two things would kind of create us we got a really strong story.
How much of that attribute do you give to like your partners that are ex-government employees? Because I'm thinking to myself, what would be the most annoying customer to implement? Okay, or it would be government companies. And thinking of like the state of mind and the confidence, or how they know how to do the political, changing something in the government is also scary because it affects, endless amount, all the population, and also the politics and bureaucracy. And also I always say in government, there's a change that commonly happens, especially in democratic countries where they change every 4 years and whatnot. So, do they is that their added value, if you say they're a plus of implementing inside, like, from the government, or is it like a minus?
In terms of the ease of implementation, what's the factor?
Aside from being great developers and great people, okay, is that a side that you feel that, I'll call it an HR, you brought in those HR that they really know how to implement inside,
So we brought in, by the way, I think part of, it's funny you say it, because part of the process, first of all, it's yes, we when we grew up from 2 customers to all of a sudden, the low teens, it was like, wow, we have customers, now we need to deploy them. Oops, we're not built for that yet, right? We didn't have enough people in the company. We're an 8-people company for more than 4 years. And, so it's like, now you cannot fuck it up, pardon my English. So it's right, because then your reputation as someone who doesn't know how to deliver can kill you. And by the way, this is part of what we actually needed to do in the last years, to be able to build the delivery team and so on. But we had domain experts that kind of help obviously manage the project and deliver. But that was one of the biggest hurdle. And as you said, in heavy, large organizations. And by the way, even if the organizations that we went for are small, the folks that feel the functionality of chief claim officer came from the big guys, right? From the mutuals of the world and so on. They had an old mindset and so on. Some kids in the office. Yeah, so we actually, a lot of attention was and is still being put on not just a great product and keep on developing the features and the smarts, but also ease of use, ease of configuration, and so on.
That idea that you had in the ideation sessions and you set off with, how much of this did you have to change? How much did the business model change during the years?
I think at the initiation, I think we had two call it pivots, or 2 standard deviation away from where we were. Now, and that was like, are we going to do this, or are we going to stick to what we thought? There's a process, but eventually you need to make a decision and go. And I think the market eventually calls you, and customers say, we had customers that actually said, listen, guys, you're not going to use the TPA. We're not going to use third-party administrators, although you guys look really, really great. And I know TPAs are bad, but I'm not going to change from a bad one to someone I don't know. But the system that you showed me, your platform, seems really, really interesting. And so slowly we start moving that direction. But once we actually had this, it was really about how do we go to the market? What's the key? How do we structure the go-to-market strategy? And then, the evolution from that point on. So not a lot has changed since then, right? But give you an example within it. Are you actually going to tackle, because you cannot do everything. Are you going to focus on auto insurance and home insurance? What's first? On everything? Are you going to do cyber? Are you going to, pets? because you cannot do everything at once, right? As much as, our platform is built up now very flexible. So there's a lot of commonality, so we can move very fast. But that wasn't at the beginning, right? So those kind of things, you listen to the market, you see opportunities, and don't forget the fact that we are a startup, and you need to raise capital, and you need to show customers. And so part of it was, let's listen to the market, see where the demand comes, and then react to be able to upload and show the companies actually like our product. They can be strong references, and you can actually start making money or generate ARR. And
when you set off, did you have any people who were your sort of reference of what type of entrepreneur you wanted to be like, or did you have any mentors?
I had a lot of maybe examples of what I don't want to be.
Give an example.
Each one is his own story. And I said, as the people are very different, companies are very, very different. You have some challenges. Everybody experiences the challenges and the roller coaster and the no's, and we can talk about that. But for me, it was like, listen a lot, just open your ears, be open to learn, and in a way, accept the fact that you don't know it all as a rule. And so I didn't have an example, right? But
is it like a disappointment a little bit, like on what you want not to be because they're good, but I want to be better person or better, whatever, I don't know, more available or?
Yeah, so I think, in my experience with so many different type of managers, some better, some worse, some good in some things. And so, there's a composition of what you want to take with you, what suits you, what you learn. I remember once just as a banker, we went to pitch a leveraged buyout pitch to this very large media company in New York. And I remember the senior banker came to me and he said, that it takes many, many years to groom someone to advise to a board of director or to a CEO or CFO of a company to give them sound advice. And I looked at him and I said, so do you want to be that one who's being groomed to give advice? Or you want to be the one who's getting the advice? And when I asked, I remember that in a cab ride, and I thought to myself, first of all, he looked at me like, but for me, it was a moment that I said, I want to make the decisions. I want to be able to, get advice from very smart people, but actually lead the road. And that maybe goes back, I know, to your initial question at the beginning. But I do believe that, again, for me, I had once a CEO that started his company meeting of a public company. The sentence started with the following sentence: the reason I never make mistakes is, and at that point there's a shut off and you don't care about the second part of the sentence. But and I would say for me it was about listening and about not panicking about making mistakes. It's okay to make mistakes, right? It's part of the journey. It's part of the story. You're gonna make those mistakes. Once in one of my interviews, I was asked, ask me a question, and I asked the guy. I said, assume I get the job and I enter my first day, what would be your advice to me as a junior? And this senior partner looked at me and said, it's a good question. He said, by definition, you're going to be juggling many, many balls in the air. And by definition, you're going to drop one or two. Just make sure the one you drop are not the one made out of glass. And I thought that was, so now when you make mistakes and, just pay attention to, right, the ones that you are, we'll call it mission critical, and ones that are less. And so not panic, but actually learn from those. So I think those kind of things for me kind of guided me moving forward. And I would say the other thing, and you asked a question about just, everything is structured. Well, in startup, almost nothing is structured. And by the way, I saw it as an M&A guy, right? When folks decided to buy a company, by the way, from the wrong strategic reasons, or they screwed up the post-merger integration. Doesn't matter how the deal brilliant it was. Years later, everybody would talk about how strategic and smart and thoughtful it was, and they made it. And many in the startup as well. Many times you can strategize as long as you want, but it's chaotic. Then you backwards, right? In retrospect, you start telling the story why it was so structured and so on. So in many cases, in many cases, it's just you just see, what you want to have, and you leverage what comes your way to actually bring it into the funnel of your path and into your strategy. You got to leverage those, and I'm not calling it opportunistic, but it's being able to really be minded, even to the blind spot, and then utilize that and leverage that into your value proposition or your path.
And how do you navigate stress and when those glass balls, even if you don't drop them, sometimes they sort of crack a bit? How do you handle that?
You move to a place close to the ocean and breathe. First of all, I think it's you gotta grow a serious stomach. I mean, we almost shut the company, 2 or 3 times. We got to a point in which we were a month and a half from no money. Domain expert who decided to leave. Investor that were like, well, we're not going to inject more. Good luck. And a few other bad news in 1 week. We had some serious crises. And I think, again, as I said, resilience, consistency, and some discipline. But you got to have the stomach. And then, by the way, it's the one minus that. So you're going to have some really great month and weeks. You cannot get into euphoria and celebrate it too much. Celebrate a little bit. But know that that's probably going to pass as well. And you're going to have some hard time. And you cannot mourn and agonize too much when it's a downturn, right?
And these are your friends, right? Your co-founders are friends.
Yeah.
How do you do the contract at the beginning? Because all of you guys before aren't like per se entrepreneurs, right? So it's all new, the legal binding and stuff. You're friends, and you want to keep that somehow, afloat. How'd you do that?
It's by the way, it's I always say that even if you have this, call it unwritten contract, or each one knows what he's doing and so on, in reality there's pressure and tension and the dynamics, and you're hiring people, and everybody it's always, and the company is an ever evolving entity. It's a completely different story, and sometimes some people are fit or not, or you got to grow with it. You got to have flexibility, and you got to know that, put aside the personality side, the personal stuff, and just be very minded to what's right for the company. But it's like relationship. It's absolutely like relationship. And if you want to work, it's always like, the question is, who is the right partner versus who's the partner I want to make it work with. And when you want to make it work with, then you're going to find a way, whatever crisis comes your way, to actually work it out.
There's a thing that I have a sentence saying, I trust people, but not circumstances. You're talking about relationship. It's the same thing with the relationship. I agree. The problem with that, and that's like something that, people oversee, but like you said, statistics of startups are low. Like if you take away that variable, I think they'd be a lot higher. The circumstances, meaning something can happen to that person that, that you have no control over. The question is this: as entrepreneurs, I'm sure that when you got into that world, it sort of shook up the status quo of understanding what is, you're suddenly in something that you don't know, the unpredicted, and there's circumstances in life, single kids, whatever. And then that. So on the relationship, there's a lot of investment in that. Like, do you guys invest in one another a lot?
Is that we got to do better. It's true. And it's again, like in relationship, right? Sometimes you run with the inertia, and there's so much to do all the time that you say, okay, the time is the most valuable thing we have. And we know this, and we went through in the company, we went through this, I would call it a full life cycle, right? Divorce and death we had in the company. Unfortunately, one of the key guys, some things that kind of shook us up to the core. And it always the personal side and the tension of what's happening on the professional side. We're doing great. We're not doing great. It never ends. And so I think, you got to be minded. You got to come down many times. You got to breathe. And I'm going to say it a gazillion times, and not jump the gun really quickly as human being. And some entrepreneurs, we always want everything is jumpy, and think really deep about everything you do and the impact on the company first and foremost, and what's right for the people. And when I went through some personal sides and dynamics in my life throughout the life cycle of the company, I actually stopped to ask myself, am I the right person to manage the company at this point with the pressure that I'm going through in my life? Is this the best thing that serves the company? Can I do it? To be honest, intellectually honest with yourself.
Is that what made you a great team, by the way? Maybe the loss did you almost lost the money, and it's still there. The invulnerability that you're asking yourself, am I maybe out loud the right person for this? And people saying yes, because we have a theory here, like that we also, in good times, it's sort of like, not appreciative, but when it brings together, also even a family is the variables of, I won't say bad shit, but heavy things that people, if you find the right people and they're empathetic enough and they're open enough, then they have that journey together, and that's what makes the loyalty, as opposed to, just making shitloads of money, being really happy, and that's not being vulnerability. You know what I mean? So like, I see a lot of teams, that's maybe what makes you a great team, the loyalty maybe.
Yeah, it's always the, if the say, right? If you want to run fast, run alone. If you want to run far, run together. But it's true. It's part of what you call it the building the infrastructure in the relationship of the team. And I think the core of it is really honesty. And you got to be honest with yourself. And I think, the fact, by the way, that sometimes I allow myself, again, in the right context, to sit down with my founders and partners and, bring up some tough issues. That's the key to be able to even solve the issues, right? It's always when there's a blind spot, you don't know what to deal with. And for me, by the way, as a CEO, part of your role, always put aside, look for the blind spot, look for what you don't see, look for what you don't know, because the things we can handle. And I think that the issue is that you don't know, and then it comes in, as a surprise, or you can add even any compounds. So I think the ability, and by the way, that triggers other people to be able to open up and share, and it becomes part of the culture. So I think for me, it's an important part, and be honest with yourself, be honest with your partners, and then you can actually build on that a very strong foundation.
What's your superpower?
Maybe people. maybe the ability to work with people, understand people, read the situation. And I'll start with the fact that I don't believe in superpowers. There's no superpowers. There's the point that you hack into yourself and say that's a point of strength. By the way, the ability to realize the points of weaknesses, right? And to be honest about it. I think that's the key thing, because then you can augment that with other people's strength.
So the superpower doesn't have to be flight. The superpower is a characteristic, right? So just what you said right now is, for me, a superpower, because if you bunch, you're in data, you bunch people together, at the end, it's not like what they learned. You're knowing yourself, you're knowing what is special characteristic. So like the just saying what you said is the exact superpower, meaning you're very approachable, and you're very realistic and down to earth, means that it's really for me, I already see you're a person that I would like to work with, because you're easy to work with, right? You're honest, listen, you have the humility, you're realistic, and I believe you as a CEO if you give the next goal. I don't think you're giving a high goal or a low goal, just by knowing you through the podcast. So I think that is a superpower. And by the way, you hacked it in a second, because every time a superpower is also a weakness, right? So that would be, if I ask you like right now, what's your kryptonite?
I've got too many to state. I'm human. So
what is something that you're working on as somebody who's very self-aware that you feel is holding you back as a theme?
Well,
empathy.
Sometimes to be a bit more harsh. I think sometimes I do feel. Sometimes I am soft. Sometimes too. But by the way, there's a point that when I'm not, then it's very, very. There's no middle. So I need to balance that a little bit, maybe.
And if you'd say, let's say, if I had to congratulate you on what would be success for you in another year?
Personally, obviously, it's the being able to grow the company, and I'm not going to talk percentages, but obviously grow and beat the expectation that I have with my investors, while maintaining a very happy house and happy kids. That's not going to tell me in the next vacation, Daddy, you're working too hard. You always work.
Where is the next vacation?
Wow. The truth is, I'm planned in 3 days to fly to Seychelles, but I'm probably going to cancel that one.
Okay, that's the answer.
I love it. I have to say that is a superpower. You're the exact opposite of the guy who says, I never make mistakes, and I really appreciate that.
It's really funny. I have good tickets and I've got everything sorted out, and I'm like, I can't do it. I got to cancel. The superpower will be not to cancel.
Yeah, please don't cancel. I think I speak for both of us when I say we wish that you go, and we also wish that what you defined as success is going to play out exactly as you've detailed.
Guys, I really, really appreciate the time.
We do.
Thanks
as well.
so much. And where can people find you if they're looking for you?
Email, LinkedIn. My email is Oded, O-D-E-D, at 5sigmalabs.com.
Thank you, Oded.
Thank you.
Real life.
Superpowers.
Up in the sky, it's a bird. It's a plane.
Gentlemen, we can rebuild him. We have the technology.
It's alive.
Real life.
Superpowers.